Picture this. January 15th, 2025. A convoy of 18-wheelers rolls through the Nuevo Leon desert at dawn. Each truck carries lithium batteries worth $3 million. They're heading north to Texas, feeding the electric vehicle revolution that's supposed to save the planet. The drivers pass gleaming new factories with German logos, Chinese investment, and American distribution contracts. This is the story we've been sold. Mexico is the new manufacturing superpower, the nearshoring miracle, the Aztec tiger that's about to devour China's lunch and become the backbone of North American industry. But here's what they don't tell you. That same convoy will pay 12 different quotas before it crosses the border. Not taxes. Quotas. Protection money to men with no uniforms and no receipts. The real truth about Mexico's economy isn't written in the investment prospectuses. It's written in blood, water, and the invisible ledger of a shadow state that employs more people than Walmart. Mexico isn't becoming an economic superpower. It's becoming the world's most expensive experiment in how much corruption a modern economy can survive before it implodes. Let's go back to 1994. NAFTA goes live on January 1st. Mexico throws open its doors to free trade with the United States and Canada. The promise is intoxicating. 70 million consumers. Cheap labor right next to the richest market on earth. Economists predict a golden age. Foreign investment pours in like tequila at a wedding. Factories sprout along the border like desert flowers after rain. Cities like Tijuana and Juarez transform overnight from dusty outposts into industrial powerhouses, churning out televisions, car parts, and textiles. The Mexican peso stabilizes. Inflation drops. For a brief moment, it looks like Mexico is about to join the first world. But beneath the surface, the ledger was already starting to crack, because Mexico made a fatal mistake. It opened its economy without fixing its institutions. It invited capital into a country where the referees could be bought, where contracts were suggestions, where the rule of law ended at the city limits. Fast forward 30 years. It's 2024, and the headlines are screaming economic miracle again. Mexico just overtook China as America's #1 trading partner for the first time in 2 decades. Foreign direct investment is hitting record highs. Tesla is building a gigafactory. BMW is expanding. Chinese companies are rushing to set up assembly plants to dodge U.S. tariffs. The Mexican peso becomes what traders call the super peso. It appreciates against the dollar so strongly that economists start using words like overvalued and appreciation crisis. On paper, Mexico's GDP is growing. Unemployment is historically low. The central bank is respected internationally. This should be Mexico's moment. This should be when the Aztec tiger finally breaks free from the middle-income trap and joins the ranks of developed nations. But here's the thing about paper. It burns. And the fire is already spreading. Let's talk about the shadow economy. Not the informal taco stands or street vendors. We're talking about the 5th largest employer in Mexico, organized crime. A 2023 study published in Science magazine calculated that Mexican cartels directly employ 175,000 people. That's more than PEMEX, the state oil company, more than any private corporation in the country. But employment numbers are just the surface. The real economic impact comes from the peso, the floor tax. Imagine you're a farmer in Michoacan growing avocados. You don't just worry about rainfall and market prices. You worry about the men who show up every month demanding their cut. They're not government officials. They don't give receipts. But if you don't pay, your workers disappear. Your trucks get hijacked. Your family gets a visit. This isn't crime. It's taxation without representation. Economists estimate that this shadow tax drains between 15 and 20% of Mexico's entire GDP every single year. Think about the scale of that. 1/5 of the entire economy vanishes into a black hole that doesn't build schools or hospitals or roads. It buys guns and bribes and body disposal services. Here's where it gets truly insane. Some of this money gets laundered back into the legal economy. Cartel bosses build shopping malls. They invest in restaurants and construction companies. They buy real estate developments. In certain regions, the narco-economy is the only thing keeping local businesses alive. When a sicario gets paid $5,000 for a job, he doesn't stuff it under his mattress. He buys a truck. He throws a party. He pays for his sister's quinceañera. That money circulates through butcher shops and beer distributors and DJ services. Remove the cartel money tomorrow and entire towns would economically collapse within a week. Mexico has created a parasitic twin economy. One side is Tesla and aerospace components. The other side is extortion and fentanyl precursors. And they're so intertwined now that you can't kill one without damaging the other. That's not an economy. That's a hostage situation. Now let's talk about the zombie in the room, PEMEX. For decades, PEMEX was the pride of Mexico. Nationalized in 1938, it symbolized Mexican sovereignty over its natural resources. It paid for the country's development. It funded schools and infrastructure. It was proof that Mexico could control its own destiny. Today, PEMEX is the most indebted oil company in the world. Not in Latin America, in the world. It owes roughly $100 billion. That's more than the entire GDP of countries like Morocco or Ecuador. How does an oil company with massive reserves end up bankrupt? Simple. The government treated it like an ATM machine. For decades, instead of letting PEMEX reinvest profits into exploration or maintenance, the government seized nearly every peso to balance the federal budget. They taxed PEMEX at rates as high as 65% of revenue. Imagine trying to run a business where 2/3 of your income gets taken before you can pay your electric bill. The infrastructure rotted, pipelines rusted. Refineries became so inefficient that Mexico had to import gasoline, despite sitting on billions of barrels of oil. Then came the final insult. Instead of modernizing or privatizing, recent administrations doubled down on nostalgia. They poured billions into building a massive new refinery called Dos Bocas. The budget was $8 billion. The final cost ballooned past $30 billion. It opened years late, and when it finally started operations, it ran at a fraction of capacity. Meanwhile, global oil markets are pivoting to renewables. Electric vehicles are becoming mainstream. The world is moving away from fossil fuels. And Mexico is betting the house on a business model from 1950. Credit rating agencies have downgraded PEMEX's debt to junk status. That means international investors consider lending money to PEMEX riskier than lending to a casino in bankruptcy. But here's the kicker. The Mexican government has guaranteed PEMEX's debt. If PEMEX defaults, the Mexican state defaults. The entire country is chained to a corpse. Let's shift to something that sounds positive, but isn't. Remittances. In 2024, Mexicans living abroad sent home over $60 billion. That's more than Mexico earns from oil exports, more than tourism. The government loves to celebrate these numbers. They call the workers sending money home heroes of the nation. But let's be honest about what this number represents. It's a failure metric. High remittances mean the domestic economy cannot provide for its own people. It means the Mexican dream is still to leave Mexico. Think about it. You're a talented engineer in Oaxaca. You could stay and earn maybe $15,000 a year. Or you could cross into Texas and earn $80,000 doing the same job. What do? You leave. You send money home to build your mom a house, and the government throws you a parade. But what did Mexico actually gain? It lost you. It lost your skills, your innovation, your tax contributions. It exported its most valuable resource, human capital, and imported cash. This creates what economists call Dutch disease. All those remittance dollars flood into Mexico. They strengthen the peso. A strong peso sounds good, but it makes Mexican exports more expensive on the global market. It makes tourism pricier. A family from Ohio suddenly realizes that Cancun costs the same as Florida, so they go to Florida. Meanwhile, local businesses can't compete because imported goods are artificially cheap. The bakery in Puebla can't match the price of bread made in Texas and shipped south. The remittance economy creates a doom loop. Young people leave because there are no good jobs. Their dollars strengthen the peso. The strong peso makes it harder for Mexican businesses to grow and create good jobs. More young people leave. The cycle repeats. Mexico becomes a nation of grandparents raising grandchildren while the parents work in a different country. That's not an economic model. That's a diaspora. Now let's talk about the geographic fracture. Mexico is not one country economically. It's two countries sharing a flag, the North and the South. In the northern states, Nuevo Leon, Chihuahua, Baja California, you see the nearshoring boom. Factories everywhere. Wages are relatively high. Infrastructure is modern, though water is scarce and the power grid flickers. If you dropped someone from Michigan into Monterey, they'd recognize the landscape. Strip malls, industrial parks, traffic jams caused by 18-wheelers hauling goods to the border. This is NAFTA land. This is where the Mexican economy interfaces with the global supply chain. Then you drive south, Chiapas, Oaxaca, Guerrero, it's a different universe. Poverty rates are double or triple the national average. Most people work in the informal economy. No contracts, no benefits, no tax receipts, just cash and survival. The infrastructure is decades behind. Roads are dirt. Electricity is unreliable. Internet is a luxury. The government tried to fix this with the Tio Maya, a massive tourist train looping through the southern jungle. The idea was to bring tourist dollars from Cancun deep into impoverished indigenous communities. The budget started at $8 billion. It exploded past $30 billion. Environmentalists are furious because the train cuts through protected jungle and threatens underground water systems. Economists are furious because it will never turn a profit. The train is a symbol of the disconnect. The North says we generate all the wealth, and the government wastes it on vanity projects in the South. The South says we've been ignored for a century, and this is the least you owe us. Neither side is wrong. Both sides are angry, and a country divided against itself cannot become a superpower. You can't have half your body sprinting toward the future and the other half stock and subsistence agriculture. That's not a tiger. That's a creature tearing itself apart. Let's address the elephant with a Chinese accent. Remember how Mexico overtook China as America's top trading partner? That sounds like a huge win, but there's a dirty secret. A lot of that Mexican export growth is Chinese. It's called transshipment. Here's how it works. The U.S. slaps a 50% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. A Chinese company says no problem. They ship the car parts to Tijuana. They bolt on the doors and wheels in a Mexican factory. They slap on a Made in Mexico sticker. Then they drive it across the border tariff-free under USMCA rules. It's legal, but it's also a massive loophole that both countries are exploiting. Mexico's trade deficit with China hit $120 billion in 2024. That means Mexico is buying mountains of Chinese components. But China isn't buying anything back. Why? Because Mexico is just the middleman. The final customer is in Los Angeles or Houston. Washington is furious. Politicians on both sides of the aisle have figured out they're being played. And this brings us to the scariest date on the calendar, July 2026. That's when the USMCA trade deal comes up for review. This isn't a courtesy meeting. It's a referendum. If the three countries don't agree to extend the deal, it enters a termination process. With protectionism rising in America, there's a real possibility that U.S. negotiators walk into that room and deliver an ultimatum. Kick Chinese companies out of your factories, or we kick you out of our market. For Mexico, this is existential. The entire nearshoring boom depends on tariff-free access to the American market. If that access disappears, the Tesla factory becomes a very expensive paperweight. The peso crashes. Foreign investment evaporates. The Aztec tiger loses its teeth overnight. Mexico has 18 months to prove it's a genuine manufacturing partner and not just a Chinese backdoor. That clock is ticking. And Mexico is spending its time arguing about judicial reforms instead of securing the deal that keeps the lights on. Speaking of judicial reforms, let's talk about the rule of law, or the lack of it. In 2020, Constellation Brands was building a $1.4 billion brewery in Mexicali. They had all the permits. They'd spent hundreds of millions. Construction was 70% complete. Then the president decided he didn't like it. He claimed it used too much water. Did he go through the courts? Did he follow due process? No. He held a public consultation, a fake referendum where barely anyone voted. Based on that, he canceled the project. Overnight, $1.4 billion evaporated. Investors around the world watched this happen. The message was clear. In Mexico, the president's whims override signed contracts. Fast forward to 2024, the ruling party pushes through a judicial reform. The core idea is electing judges by popular vote. That sounds democratic, but legal experts and foreign investors are terrified. Why? Because judges who campaign for votes become politicians. They become beholden to the party that funds their campaign. Or worse, beholden to the cartels who can contribute dark money. Imagine you're a multinational corporation in a legal dispute with a Mexican state-owned company. Do you think an elected judge who needs government support to keep his job will rule fairly? Of course not. This is institutional suicide. The USMCA trade agreement requires Mexico to maintain an independent judiciary. By politicizing the courts, Mexico is technically violating the treaty, and the consequences are already visible. Tesla has slowed its gigafactory plans. Chinese EV manufacturers are delaying announcements. Capital is pausing because capital is a coward. It hates uncertainty. And right now, Mexico is screaming, "We're changing the rules of the game while you're still playing." If Mexico becomes a country where contracts are just suggestions, the nearshoring boom ends not with a bang, but with a quiet exodus of investment to Vietnam or India. Now let's talk about something that makes locals furious: the gringo invasion. Post-pandemic, digital nomads discovered they could work remotely from anywhere. They looked at San Francisco rents of $4,000 a month and looked at Mexico City rents of $1,500. The math was easy. They packed their laptops and moved south. Neighborhoods like Condesa and Roma in Mexico City transformed overnight. Rents doubled, then tripled. Coffee shops started charging $8 for a latte. Taco stands began accepting Venmo. This sounds great for landlords, but it's catastrophic for locals. The average Mexican salary is around $800 a month. When a remote worker offers $2,000 for an apartment, the local family gets evicted. They're pushed to the dangerous periphery. Their commute goes from 20 minutes to 2 hours. It's economic colonization. You're seeing protests, signs in windows telling tourists to leave, a rise in anti-American sentiment in places that used to be welcoming. The super peso made this worse. For years, Mexico was cheap. It was the backpacker's paradise, the retiree's dream. Not anymore. In 2024, Mexico City ranked among the most expensive cities in Latin America. If you're earning in dollars, it's manageable. If you're earning in pesos, you're being priced out of your own neighborhood. This gentrification is a symptom of a deeper disease. Mexico is importing rich foreigners, but not raising wages for locals. It's creating a theme park economy, a Disneyland for wealthy expats, surrounded by a sea of poverty. The locals serve the drinks and clean the Airbnbs, but can't afford to live in the city center anymore. That's not development. That's displacement. And it's fueling a resentment that will eventually explode into political backlash. Let's zoom out to the final trap, the informal economy. About 55% of Mexican workers operate informally. They don't pay income tax, don't have Social Security, and don't exist on paper. Picture two brothers. Carlos works at a Ford plant. He earns well, but loses nearly 30% to taxes. Juan runs a taco stand and sells gray market phones. He earns the same, maybe more, and pays zero tax. In the short term, Juan looks smart. Why fund a corrupt state? But this is the tragedy. Because tens of millions don't pay taxes, Mexico collects only 16% of GDP in tax revenue, far less than the U.S. or Europe. The government stays broke. It can't fund schools, infrastructure, or police. Services collapse. Corruption rises. People refuse to pay taxes. The cycle repeats forever. There's another problem. Informal workers can't scale. One can't get bank loans, can't export, can't grow. Economists call this the productivity ceiling. Mexico has a Ferrari engine, advanced factories, and global supply chains, but half the wheels are bicycle tires. You can't win races like that. That's why Mexico is stuck in the middle-income trap. It is everything to become a powerhouse location, labor, trade deals, but half its economy lives in the shadows. Mexico stands on a razor's edge. The next few years will decide whether it finally breaks free or wastes its moment again.